What happens when you're continually told that something is going to be hard? Whether it's from your parents, your boss, your coworkers, even your own self talk. Well, if you're told something enough times, chances are you're going to start to believe it. And the thing about your beliefs is that they tend to play out exactly the way you would have expected. You start to hesitate, you overthink, and you stay right where you are. So, what if the problem isn't that you don't know how to change, but it's the story you've been telling yourself about how hard change is going to be? Welcome to Change Made Easy. Changing your habits, routines, and behaviors is hard. We make it easy. I'm Paul Leviton, and I help high achievers just like you who feel stuck bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Traditional self-help doesn't work. It's either too rigid, too generic, or too overwhelming. My approach is different. I simplify change, making it so easy it can't not happen. Using my easier framework, I'll help you create habits, routines, and behaviors that stick for good, so you can stop struggling and start thriving. It's that easy. Today's guest challenges something that most people never even question: the belief that change has to be hard. I'm joined by Wani Iris, an attorney turned public speaker and the author of the book Get Out of Survival Mode. And she's here to talk about exploring a different perspective. What if change didn't have to be so hard? What if it isn't hard, it's just uncomfortable? And if that's true, what are you actually avoiding? So today we explore why calling something hard might be the very thing that keeps you from doing it, the uncomfortable truth about identity and what you might have to let go of in order to grow, and how chasing approval, success, or stability can quietly pull you off of the path you're meant to be on. This conversation is deeper than just habits. It challenges how you think about yourself, your identity, and the responsibility you have to living your own best life. If you've ever felt stuck between who you are and who you want to become, this episode will help you understand what's really in the way. And with that, please enjoy this conversation with Wani Iris. So, Wani, this being the Change Made Easy podcast, I think the natural place to start is, why is change so hard?
It's because we tell ourselves that it's actually hard, and it's not. I mean, universally, I don't care where I've ever spoken, what stage I've ever been on a stage anywhere. If I ask a question, what does everybody think about change? The universal answer is that it's hard. And so, if we're telling ourselves that it's actually hard, guess what? It is going to be hard because we're programmed. We're literally, I mean, the words that we're actually are speaking is exactly what's how we're creating our lives. So if we're telling ourselves anything that's actually difficult, or we're just going to create that for ourselves, we're going to have a reluctancy to actually to move towards it. Our mind's going to not want to do it. So yeah, with the first, this we have to divorce ourselves from the mantra that changes that is hard, because it's not. It's just challenging and it's uncomfortable, but it's not hard. We've been changing our entire lives.
I I love that, and I completely agree. I'm very big on the power of words and the way that we speak being very impactful and very specific about the words that we choose. And so, what is the difference as you see it between something being hard or challenging or uncomfortable? Because if I'm listening, I'm just like, yeah, it all sucks.
That's a good question. It's challenging in the sense that it's uncomfortable, right? And we just love to be comfortable. And what is really uncomfortable is that it's really like unfamiliar, you know? And so a lot of it's that in order for any change to actually be effective, it's like as some part of us has to die off. Like there has to be some ego death. There has to be like some type of like identity shift. And a lot of times we don't want to shift who we really are to become like the things we're trying to acquire that's going to require like a different version of ourselves. And so it is uncomfortable, for a little bit, but and it's just because it's unfamiliar to our brain. But after a certain while, it's the unfamiliar will become familiar and it won't be uncomfortable anymore. So the challenge comes is just you just want to hold on to your old self, onto your old identity, but yet you want something completely different. It doesn't work. There's disconnect.
Yes. So I'm right there with you. It's unfamiliarity is at the root of all of this. You said there a part of you has to die, right? The
Yeah.
ego death, and that's hard for us to let go of who we once were in search of, or to allow us to become who we're going. It's I think of the analogy or something like you can't grab with a closed hand, right? So it's like you have to let go of what you're holding to be able to grab onto what is coming. So I'm curious for you personally, what has that been like for you? What's something that you had to let go of in order to take that next step in your personal, your professional life?
For me, it's definitely been in a professional life, in my professional life, because I'm an attorney by trade, and so I've been groomed to be a lawyer since I was 2 years old. I've been practicing for over 2 decades, and so when it became to when I came, okay, speaking was my next evolution. I did not want to let that go because I thought I was going to be a lawyer my entire life. It's in my DNA. You cannot tell me that I'm not an attorney, and so letting that go, it's like, who am I actually going to be? And there's also too for there's another piece of it. I realized it's just not like, oh, I'd have no idea who I would actually be. There's probably like a bit of like, do I feel like an imposter, like a different role? It's also too because I've worked so hard to be an attorney. It's like, I've my entire 20s I was in a library. I was never partying. I wasn't acting up. And so it's like there's been so much invested. I mean, 6 figures of a student loan debt is like I put so much like blood, sweat, and tears and equity into it. And it's like you asked me to let that go. So the ego was like, absolutely not. Like, there's no way I'm gonna let that go. What
So
do you mean you want to be a speaker? You're like, what is even that? You know what I'm saying? It's like
right. So what happens? Like, what is your take me through the steps or like your internal self talk in those moments? Like you said, you've been
Mhm,
for 20 plus years, you've been on this
mhm,
trajectory of like, I'm going to be a lawyer. It's what my parents said that I needed to do. I figured it out. I've done the thing. I've gone to school. I've spent the money. And now it's like, even be though you're choosing to transition, like you're choosing to make this shift. No one is
mhm,
forcing you to become a speaker, but it's what you feel called to do, or it's just the next phase of your life. But still, something inside your head is saying like, this is crazy. Don't do this. How do you get yourself to take that leap into the unfamiliar, or how did you?
For me, it was like in phases, or it has been in phases. Like, for example, I had made a bargain with myself, which was when my speaking income matches my legal income, then I'll let it go. Right. And so that never really quite happened. And so, okay, then it was just more of like, the universe, God is always speaking to us, like, hey, do this. And it's always like a little whisper. Right. And then at certain point in times, like, it just hits it like with the hammer, where it's like, okay, do this now. And so for me, one thing about me is I'm very much self-aware, and I know that what's I could hear the chatter, of like, who would I be? Like, what is it gonna look like? And I've worked so hard for everything. But then I had to ask myself, like, I was looking at how I was actually feeling. There was a bit of disenchantment with my law practice or just what I was actually doing. I wasn't quite passionate about it. I was attracting like problematic clients. Like people just want like a whole lot. And like, what do you mean I'm not a babysitter? So it was just like little things just started happening, just started like occurring. I was like, okay, I know what's going on here. I'm being pushed to let this go and to just trust it's like, I'm going on an adventure. I love to do this. Yes, it's going to be different. It's going to feel different, but I love being on stage. And so just kind of like really also to affirming every single day I'm an in-demand, highly paid speaker. And I would just like literally talk to myself all the time to reaffirm my new identity because all I've known my entire life has been a lawyer. And so now when people, when I introduce myself, I never tell people I'm an attorney. But it does come up because I do speak about the law, and I said, okay, yeah, I speak about change, and I speak about intellectual property, and well, what do you mean intellectual property? Like, yeah, I'm also, I've been a lawyer as well too, so it comes out, but I always make sure it's secondary for me now. Now, speaking is it's what the lead is, but I've had to recondition, reprogram my mind of who I am right now.
It's so interesting the power of words and reconditioning your mind. And it speaks to something I've heard you talk about in the past, which is the importance and power of identity. So,
Mhm.
how do you see that playing into your ability to make the shift, or for anyone listening, their general ability to start making change? But more importantly, I think for me and for my listeners, change that lasts, because that's something I think that a lot of people know how to make change. It's like, oh yeah, I did this thing for 6 months. It's like, I don't care about that. I want it to be forever. So how does the identity piece play into making that sustainable long-term change?
I would say for me, it really comes. One of my favorite quotes is by Alan Watts, which is, "You are under no obligation to be the same person who you were 5 minutes ago." And to me, when I heard that, like I don't have any tattoos like you do, but if I did, like that would be it would be like it would be like quotes are really impacts me, right? And so for me, when I heard that, it wasn't something that just went over my head. It was what gave me the permission to say, you know what, you can be something else besides what you've always been, and it's not going to take away what you've done. In fact, I really believe like divine economy and like everything that you have done is always going to just encapsulate yourself whatever you're doing. So it starts with really giving yourself permission to let the other person, the other version of you go, or I would say like the other iteration, because you're not going to throw away, like in my case, 22 years of wisdom and and practice things like that. And so really making it stick, like really kind of also to amplifying like the new identity, really focusing on like, okay, what do you like about it? And for me, I just light up when I'm on stage. It's like I love the feeling of of being there, of like I my favorite part of getting on stage is actually being mic'd up, with the wireless mic, and so I focus on those things. I do a lot of visualization, and I do a lot of like every day I reaffirm who I am. And it's okay. And it's okay for me to be this way. It's okay. And I think like really I really believe in talking to yourself in terms of like really reaffirming like what is okay, because at the end of the day, your nervous system or your mind like just wants to know it's actually okay. And so in order to make it stick, you really have to just kind of be like intentional about it as well too. You can't be, kind of haphazard about it, or just kind of like, halfway doing it. And so for me, I think that the permission piece is really huge. It's just allowing us to say, it's okay for me to do something completely different.
Yeah, giving yourself permission, I think, is such a powerful concept, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And I think that, as you said, the self-talk, the mindfulness, the mantras, the affirmations help that move you in that direction, right? It's like the person I'm becoming, the person I am. But I'm curious for you specifically. I would assume being groomed to be a lawyer since you were 2 years old, that wasn't specifically just about you. There is a
Yeah.
parental aspect to all of that. So while it might be easy to, or maybe not easy, but theoretically to give yourself permission, how do you deal with the others in your life, the people who be it your parents or the other people in your law firm or all of the other influences that are chirping in your ear about what you should or shouldn't do, or the mistakes that you're making, or whatever else is going to be, because I would just think that that's something that you had to deal with a lot.
Oh my God, did I ever, especially because so my background is actually West African. I was born in the United States, but my parents were African. And so in African culture, at least sub-Saharan Africa, you either three things. You're either a lawyer, you're a doctor, or you're an engineer. There is no, I'm going to be a writer, be something completely different. And so, and my father was like from Minister of Finance for the country for Liberia when I was younger, and so there was all of that to have to grapple with this one too. And then also too, before I went into private practice, I had achieved the American dream of buying a nice place in Miami, driving a Porsche, and having like a semi-corner office that was in all marble. And so there was all of that as well too. And it was very much this whole tribal of like, you've made us so proud type thing. But then I began to realize, and there's a part of me, I think for every child, we do want to make our parents proud. But then, like, as I just got older, and I was just like, you know what? It's my happiness that actually matters, and when it got to the point to where I wasn't quite happy as I used to be, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore, because at the end of the day, I'm responsible for my happiness. They are responsible for their happiness as well too, and I'm no one else's dream. Meaning, like, they didn't have me for them to chase their dream. None of them want to be a lawyer, but it's like I don't owe anyone else to be a lawyer. I owe myself to be happy. And like, I'm really big. I love the assignment. I think, yeah, the school assignment from John Lennon, where his teacher asked like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And he says, "I want to be happy." And she writes, "You don't understand the time." He goes, "No, you don't understand life." And so I am very, very clear that that is a point of life. It is to be happy. And it's like, I am responsible for that. I'm not supposed to be making anybody else happy. And so I've had to learn to be selfish. And you have to be.
You know, I love that. Your own happiness is your own responsibility. And I think there's a interesting paradox in that, yes, you have to learn to be selfish. And yet I teach people that being selfish is actually being selfless, because the version of you that the world deserves is the happiest version. The version of you that the world deserves is the version that you're building, that you're speaking on stage, where you're spreading your message, where you're doing what lights you up every day,
Yeah.
and not the version that is playing small, or even again, is being a high powered lawyer playing small. I don't know, but playing small in the sense of like you're doing what was given to you, what was told
Yeah.
to you, what was forced to you, not because it's what you actually want. So it's the
Yeah.
same thing I tell people all the time, because this always comes up. Where it's like, well, I can't do X, Y, and Z because I got to take care of my kids, or I got to do my job, or I got to do a million things instead of take care of myself. And then I tell people that being selfish is selfless, because the best version of you is the version of you that can show up the most brightly in this world. And then again, paradoxically, being what we think is selfless, which is giving everything to others before we give to ourselves, is actually selfish, because the only reason to do that is because it's easier than the opposite. It's not having to confront that hard thing, that discomfort,
Yeah.
that that unknown, that of like your parents, the
Yeah.
other, that your bosses, and like say like, I'm actually going to do something crazy and I'm going to bet on myself, and like
Yeah.
that is extremely scary, and we hold ourselves back from doing that. So I just wanted to say all that because I appreciate you saying that, like you chose to be selfish, and I don't think that that's a negative thing. It has a negative connotation, but I do believe that if more people were selfish in that regard,
Yeah.
the world would actually be a better place, I think.
100%. And I think the other piece of that also too is having to let go of your parents' approval, which, we all have that to a certain degree. In other cultures, it's a lot more exasperated. I know for sure in my culture it is. And I just had to let go of that. And I was just like, again, going back to being selfish, like, you know what? And you're right. It's like the more I'm well taken care of, the more I'm lit up, the more it's betterment for humanity, for them, for everybody else as well too. But the trigger always comes up. I'm at home right now with my mom, and it's still coming up. Trust me.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure it doesn't go away, but what we have to do for ourselves. And again, my listeners know I started as a personal trainer, and
Yeah.
in personal training, it always comes up with parents, because parents will say, on one hand, my kids are the most important thing for me and I need to get healthy for my kids, but then they'll also not go to the gym because they'll go, well, I got to take my kids to soccer or something like that. And it's like there's a balance to be had where you have to prioritize yourself, otherwise you end up resentful, you end up hating the very people that you're trying to help or that you're trying to seem better for. And I think that that's a form in itself of self-sabotage, because
Yeah.
eventually we can only play that game so long before you end up snapping. And
Yeah.
I know it's something that you've spoken about or written about in your book, that's all about self-destructive patterns. Your book, Get Out of Survival Mode and Live the Life That You Really Want. And I know that in that book you have over 100 self-destructive patterns. Since we don't have time to go over all 109 of them today, I'd be curious, I would assume, but this is just me assuming, that there's a few of those patterns that you see play out the most. So if there were like one, two, or three patterns that you see play out across most people, most cultures, everywhere in the world, what are the things that you see holding people back the most, or people doing self-destructive tendencies getting in their own way?
I would say first and foremost, which is the foundational piece and chapter one, is the outsourcing your love for yourself to other people, and it's not to our fault ever to it's not our fault at all, because I have yet to meet anyone who parents taught them self-love. We were always taught that love was something you got from your parents, from your caregivers, from your school. So it was always something we always saw externally. And so it sets us up from going to life to where we have no idea how to actually love ourselves, right? And so we get into these marriages and relationships, and we think like someone else gonna is responsible for our loving us. It doesn't quite work out that way, and we're surprised when there's a divorce. And so I would say, number one is actually we don't love ourselves, and because nobody ever taught us how to actually love ourselves. We don't even accept ourselves. And so if you don't have those two foundational pieces locked in, you're not going to feel worthy enough to actually go after things you actually want to do, or you actually do, because you're not gonna feel like you actually deserve it at all. So that was like, if anything out of the entire book, like to work on. I guess there's 108 chapters, but like that and first most for me is like the it right there. I mean, the whole book could have been written by self love, but that is the number one thing. And then I will also say as well too, it's like living for other people. Again, going back to who are you actually living for? Who are you trying to make proud? Whose dream are you actually living? Are you living your dream, or are you living someone else's dream to to speak positive words about you? So we have to get into this thing to where, or get to a point to where that we are just getting into our sovereignty, because I feel like we've lost so much of that. When we're operating the world based on, and it's like it's across the board, and so, but once you actually like have the self-love piece into where like you're sourcing how you feel about yourself within you, it gets a lot, everything else becomes a lot easier.
Very good answer, and so interesting because I've talked ad nauseum about self-destructive tendencies and self-sabotage on this podcast. I've done entire courses on self-sabotage. I've done entire episode series on self-sabotage, and that's just such an interesting direction that I didn't expect you to take. And but it's so true. See that as a watershed moment, right? Like self love. Like if you do everything, if everything goes left or right based on the level of self love that we a have for ourselves, and b, I think almost maybe potentially more importantly can put out actively, because it's one thing to say that we love ourselves, like yeah, of course I love myself, but it's another thing to make those active choices and choose yourself. So how do you start to your point, we've never been taught this stuff. There's no self-love class, as far as I know, in elementary school or junior high school. How do you start to build this as a skill if it is something that's so important, but it's something that we've never been taught?
Very easy. Number one, just put your hand on your heart and just to start saying, I love you. We're so addicted to the phones and the screens and, and everything else. It's like literally putting your hand on your heart. Like we're not connected to ourselves anymore. And so just by sitting there, putting your hand on your heart, like before you go to bed at night, it is going to change your frequency. You're going to become into more like coherent with your own body. And just to start saying to yourself, I love you. I mean, when was the last time you told yourself you love yourself, Paul?
I could not tell you.
You see, you see what I mean? And so just to and do it, like say it out loud, because I didn't come from a culture where it was said a lot. It was said a lot, you know what I mean? And so for me, I say it to myself all the time. And I just always like, you have to reparent yourself. And so whatever you didn't get from your family, you have to give it to yourself. And so that is just also too, like that's the step one. And number two is actually having standards for yourself, because a lot of us are trying to be low maintenance, to not be deemed to be high maintenance, especially as a woman. But it's like, no, if you truly loved yourself, you would actually have higher standards for yourself, like what you're willing to accept, what you're not willing to accept. And a lot of us are just going through life like whatever, like I'm down for whatever. It's like, no, it's like if you truly loved yourself, you wouldn't accept certain things for yourself. And it's okay to have high standard. It doesn't mean like you're not agreeable. It just means like you just love yourself. And if you actually loved yourself and have better standards for yourself, you would feel like you deserve the best. And so you would actually act on that. And it's so, but it's like we also have to have standards for ourselves, and they have to be high as well too. I'm not saying insurmountable, but like those are two for me, like the very good starts right there. And we also have to say no as well too. We have to cut down all the people please, because and no is a complete sentence. I know people have heard it before, but it's like it's okay to say no and to actually rest. I had to learn, because I mean, it's rare. I don't know a single lazy lawyer on the planet, okay? Because we're just trained to be like worker bees, And so for me, I had to tell myself, I had to program, for me, rest is productive and highly profitable. I don't need to be working 7 hours, 7 days a week, and all the weekends, things like that. And it's like, I can still make money, by resting, and so that's an act of self-love as well too, like self-care, taking care of yourself by what you feed it, what you putting into your body, like, what are you telling to yourself, like what are you consuming every day? So many things.
Yeah, it's so good and such a powerful foundation. I definitely think that anyone who's interested or that piqued their interest, definitely to go check out your book to find out all of the rest of the tidbits that you have, and I'll link to that in the show notes. My last two questions, Wani, are the same questions I ask every guest, and you kind of answered it already, so you can feel free to continue on the same thread or pull on a different one. But the first question is, what is the change that you want to see in the world?
I would love to The change that I would love to see in the world is that everyone being more intentional about what they want their lives to actually be and what they want it to actually become. Because I can tell you, I didn't know about living by intentions until like, about 10 years ago, so because no one ever taught me that. And so when you start living intentionally every single day, which means just means you're just being, much more aware of, what you're becoming, who you're becoming, it just makes things a lot easier how it actually falls into place. And I will also say the second thing is like, we have to decide that the universe, God is actually on our side. Because I think so many of us go through so many challenges in life that actually forces us to actually change, or things change actually happens where we have no choice but to adapt, and we think that, or to succumb to it, and we think that we're being punished. And I just want to say that every no matter what you're going through, whatever it's, you're not being punished at all. You're being purified. Like it's not like it's not puny, you know what I mean? And so we have to like really see that we live in a very friendly universe where everything is it's geared up for us to succeed, even the challenging moments.
That the idea of living in a friendly universe. I think that's a super
Yeah.
powerful takeaway from all of this. My last question, and again, feel free to go in any direction, something you've already said or something that is brand new. If you have one action step that listeners can take right now, today, as soon as this episode ends, as soon as they take their headphones out, to
Mm.
start making whatever change they're trying to make in their life just a little bit easier, what can they do?
I would say just to start monitoring like how you speak about yourself. How are you taking a compliment? How are you waking up in the morning? Like, what are you telling yourselves? Because, we don't realize like how much of the way we speak to ourselves is so negative. And so again, I'm really or really big on, the words we actually speak because, again, I mean, once you really see the correlation, like how you're speaking about your life and how you're speaking about yourself and how you're speaking to yourself, literally is like life hold up a mirror to you, you would change everything.